They love you. They need you. But let's be honest, they don't need to know everything. If you're between 55 and 75, there's something you probably already understand. Life is full of moments you carry in your heart and keep to yourself. And that's not about hiding. It's about wisdom. Because sometimes protecting your children isn't about shielding them from the world. It's about not unloading your entire past on their shoulders. You've lived through decades of joy, heartache, choices, good and bad, and a fair bit of lessons that didn't come easy. But not every lesson you've learned has to be handed down like a family recipe. In fact, some truths are best left unspoken, not because they're dark or shameful, but because sharing them might do more harm than good. Today, we're going to talk about something that doesn't get mentioned in retirement guides or family meetings. The things you shouldn't tell your children. These aren't about secrets in the traditional sense. They're about emotional boundaries, generational wisdom, and knowing when silence can be a gift. We'll go through 9 things many parents over 55 should consider keeping to themselves. Let's begin with the first one. There are moments from your past, painful ones, that still leave a sting when you think about them. Maybe it was a betrayal, a friend who vanished when you needed them, a marriage that ended, a decision you regret. And yes, there may be an urge to explain yourself or pass on these stories as lessons to your kids. But here's the thing. When you unload past trauma onto your children, especially without context or resolution, they often don't hear it as a story. They feel it as a burden. They may start questioning everything they thought they knew about their family or feel responsible for your pain, even though it happened long before they were born. There's a difference between being emotionally honest and emotionally heavy. If you're still carrying certain wounds, it's okay to talk to a friend, a counselor, a journal. But your children, they deserve to be free of that emotional weight. Give them the gift of stability, of being able to look back on their childhood without constantly reevaluating it through the lens of your unresolved sorrow. You're allowed to have parts of your life that stay yours. It doesn't make you secretive. It makes you strong. Now, let's talk about the second secret, and this one is tricky. Your financial fears. Even if you've done well for yourself, there may still be that voice in your head asking, will I outlive my savings? What if I need help later? What if the market crashes again? It's normal to worry, especially when retirement isn't always as smooth as the brochures promised. But here's what's important. Constantly talking about those fears to your children, especially if they're just starting their own families or trying to build their careers, doesn't just add stress to your plate, it puts it on theirs too. You might think you're just sharing, or maybe hoping they'll jump in to help later on if things get tight. But even a casual comment like, I hope I can afford my care later on, can plant seeds of anxiety in your kids. They might start thinking, what if we need to take in mom? Should we be saving for her too? Can we even afford that? Now their plans are being shaped by your worries, and that's not the legacy you want to leave behind. If you're truly concerned about money, get advice from a financial planner, even a free community resource. Have private conversations with professionals who can help you plan. But let your kids enjoy their season of life. Encourage them, support them, and if the time ever comes that you need real help, then yes, have that conversation. But don't let fear become your family's third wheel at every dinner conversation. Being open is one thing. Being secure enough to hold your own uncertainty without passing it on is something else entirely. Now that we've talked about what's worth keeping quiet when it comes to personal pain and financial fear, let's shift gears and dig a little deeper into something many people don't even realize they're doing. And that's when it sneaks in the little comments, offhand remarks, and sighs that say more than we mean. What I'm talking about is comparison. And that brings us to the next secret, how your children are doing compared to others, including their own siblings. You might not say it outright. Maybe it's just, your brother always calls every Sunday, but I know you're busy. Or, your cousin just bought a house. Isn't that something? It sounds innocent. It sounds casual. But those tiny jabs, they stick. And often, they cut deeper than you realize. Even as adults, our kids want one thing from us. Approval. Quiet, unconditional. Don't make me earn approval. When they feel like they're being measured against someone else, even unintentionally, it doesn't inspire them. It discourages them. It creates distance. And often, they don't push back, they just pull away. The truth is, every one of your children is walking a different road, with different hills to climb. And just because one's life looks more together from the outside, doesn't mean they're doing better inside. You don't have to lie. You don't have to pretend things are perfect. But what they need from you, what they'll remember years from now, is whether or not they felt seen, not as a version of someone else, but as themselves. So even if your mind goes there, even if you wish one child was more like another, hold that thought. Let your love be the constant, not the scoreboard. Now, let's talk about something else that can be hard to keep inside, especially as we get older: regrets. Maybe you didn't chase that dream job because the timing wasn't right. Maybe you stayed in a relationship longer than you should have. Maybe you wish you traveled more or less, or spoken up when it counted. That little voice that says, if I could go back, I would have done it all differently. And you may feel tempted to share those regrets with your kids, thinking you're doing them a favor, a cautionary tale. You want them to avoid the same mistakes. But here's the danger. When you constantly express regret about your past, it can start sounding like disappointment about your life. And your life is their foundation. When you say, I wish I had done more with my life, they might hear, was our life not enough for you? When you say, I should have never married your father, even in jest, it can shake the very ground they stand on. Sometimes, what feels like honesty to us feels like instability to them. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be reflective or vulnerable, but think about the why before you share. Are you processing aloud because you need comfort, or are you passing along wisdom because they truly asked for it? Instead of saying, I regret never starting my own business, maybe try. If there's something you really want to do, don't wait like I did. I believe in you. Now, you're not just unloading your regret, you're lifting them up with it. There's power in that shift, in turning old wounds into strength for someone else's journey. And while we're on the subject of what we carry, let's talk about aging. That slow, surprising, sometimes frustrating journey that can take us from hiking trails to orthopedic shoes in the blink of an eye. It's natural to talk about the changes, the body aches, the memory slips, the occasional what did I come in this room for again moments. But the fourth secret you may want to keep to yourself is this: stop telling your children how much you hate getting older, because when you do, you're planting fear about their own future. Aging is already something our culture tries to avoid like the plague. And when your kids hear you complain constantly about it, about your body, your energy, your loneliness, they don't just hear you. They see themselves years down the line, and it terrifies them. That doesn't mean you have to fake it. You can absolutely talk about health. You can ask for support. But there's a difference between talking about challenges and making aging sound like a curse. The more you speak with bitterness about your own stage of life, the more it makes your children dread their own. And the irony? Every age comes with its own kind of beauty. You've got time-tested wisdom, a better understanding of what truly matters, the ability to let go of nonsense that would have once driven you crazy. That's not nothing. That's the good stuff. So instead of saying, I hate getting old, maybe just say, some days are harder, sure, but I've earned every gray hair and I still have plenty of life to live. That mindset, that subtle shift, might just change the way they look at the future. And that's a gift. Now, we've covered some pretty meaningful ground so far. We've talked about why your past doesn't always need to be unpacked, how to hold back financial fears, the danger comparison, and how regrets and aging can quietly impact your children's emotional landscape. But there are still more subtle, deeply human things that you may not realize can quietly shift the dynamic between you and your kids. Because even when you think you've said too much, there's always one more thing sitting right on the tip of your tongue. And more often than not, it's about the thing you gave up, whether it was a dream, a trip, a relationship, or a life path you almost followed. The next secret you may want to keep close to your chest is how much you sacrifice for your children. Now look, no one's denying that being a parent often means putting someone else's needs before your own. You gave them the better portion. You stayed in jobs you didn't love. You skipped vacations, pinched pennies, maybe even missed chances that would have changed your life. And in your heart, you did it out of love. But if you're constantly reminding them of that, if every conversation is laced with, I could have done this, but I chose you, even in subtle ways, it doesn't land the way you think it does. They don't feel honored. They feel guilty. They start to wonder if they were a burden, if your life would have been brighter without them. And no child, no matter how old they are, wants to carry that thought in their chest. There's a quiet nobility in doing something for someone and never needing them to know. You can still take pride in those choices, but let your love stand without condition, without receipts. The best sacrifices are the ones that speak for themselves, even when no one else knows they were made. And now, let's talk about one that catches a lot of people off guard. And that's how lonely you feel sometimes. It's real, it's valid, and let's face it, it's not easy. The kids grow up, the house gets quieter, the phone calls come less often than you'd like. Maybe you lost a partner, or friends have drifted apart. Loneliness after 60 is one of the most common emotional experiences, but it's also one of the hardest to talk about. And sometimes, we unintentionally use our children as our lifeline, calling multiple times a day, asking when they're visiting next, telling them how no one else ever comes by. It's not meant to guilt them, but that's how it often feels. Suddenly, their presence becomes an obligation instead of a joy. And the more pressure you place on their time, the less freely they offer it. So instead of framing your life as something they have to fill, show them you're still living it. Reignite old friendships, volunteer, join a club, take a class. Anything that makes your world feel full again. Let your children see that you're thriving, not just waiting. That doesn't mean hiding your feeling. It means not building your whole world around someone else's visits. And when they do call or come by, the joy will be real. Not because it cured your loneliness, but because it added to a life that's already meaningful. Here's another secret we often carry, especially when the body starts to slow and the world moves fast. The fear of becoming irrelevant. You've lived through eras of change, from rotary phones to smartphones, from handwritten letters to voice assistants. And while the world has sped up, sometimes it feels like it's left you behind. Maybe you struggle with new technology. Maybe you don't quite understand the slang, the culture shifts, the way everything now seems to happen online. And maybe, somewhere deep down, you've started to believe your thoughts and stories don't matter anymore, that you're being tolerated, not truly heard. And that fear, it can lead to over-explaining, to repetition, to pushing too hard to be included in every little thing. You might say things like, I guess I'm too old to understand, or back in my day, not out of pride, but out of defensiveness. But here's the truth. Your value doesn't disappear with age. In fact, your lived experience has more weight than ever. You've seen things most people haven't. You've navigated real challenges. You've survived. Instead of apologizing for being older, lean into it. Speak from that place of earned wisdom, not from fear. And when your kids talk about something you don't understand, ask questions, not because you're lost, but because you're interested. You don't need to prove your worth. You already have it. Sometimes, the best way to show you're still part of the world is by being curious about their world, not trying to outpace it. And that leads to something else we rarely say out loud, but it bubbles under the surface. That fear that one day, they won't need you anymore. You raised them to be independent. You taught them to stand on their own 2 feet. And now, they're doing exactly that. They're not calling for advice. They don't need help fixing the sink or balancing the checkbook. They've got it handled. And you're proud, but you're also invisible. You might not admit it, but maybe you find little ways to insert yourself, fixing things that don't need fixing, giving advice they didn't ask for, offering money, even when it's not needed, because in your heart, you're trying to feel needed again. But here's what's powerful, realizing that your role doesn't disappear. It evolves. They may not need you like they once did, but they still want your presence, your support, your steadiness. If you let go of the need to be indispensable, you might find that your children connect with you more freely, without the weight of obligation. And that connection, that's the gold. You're not their problem solver anymore. You're their compass, quiet, consistent, loving, and still very much there. And that brings us to the final thing many of us don't even realize we're carrying, the fear of becoming a burden. It's a quiet thought that shows up when you feel yourself slowing down, when the stairs get harder, or remembering names takes a moment longer. When the doctor's visits get more frequent, you start to wonder, what if I need help one day? What if they have to take care of me? What if my independence slips away and I'm just in the way? So you don't say it, or maybe you say it too much. I don't want to be a burden. If I get sick, just put me in a home. You joke about it or speak with a kind of stubbornness that sounds noble, but underneath, it's just fear. And here's what's important to remember. While it's wise to prepare for the future, you don't have to let fear of becoming a problem stop you from being honest, from staying connected, from asking for support when it's truly needed. Your children might not need to know every ache and worry, but they do need to know they're trusted, that if and when you need help, you'll tell them clearly. You don't have to pretend you're invincible. And you don't have to push them away just to protect their time or peace of mind. They love you. They care. They want you to live fully, not quietly disappear into silence and pride. There's strength in saying, I'm still doing okay, but if that changes, I'll let you know. That kind of openness builds trust, and it allows them to be there, not out of obligation, but out of love. Now, let's take a breath and look back for just a moment. These secrets we've talked about, they aren't lies. They're not acts of deception. They're choices about how much to share, when to speak, and when to hold certain things with grace. They're about protecting your peace and protecting your children's emotional space, too. Because just as you once filtered the world for them when they were young, softened the edges, kept some things unsaid to help them feel safe, now, in this season of life, that instinct can still serve you. But don't mistake quiet strength for silence. You still have a voice, you still have value, and you still have a beautiful, evolving role in your family. Not as the fixer, not as the martyr, not as the forgotten, but as the foundation. The one who shows that love doesn't always have to be loud to be lasting. So if you ever wonder whether you should speak up or stay quiet, pause and ask yourself, am I saying this for healing or for relief? Will it serve them or shift the weight onto their shoulders they never asked to carry? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't to say everything. It's to know what matters most and let that be enough. You are still writing your story every single day. And your children, they're watching, learning, absorbing more than you think. Not just what you say, but how you live. So show them how to age with dignity, with joy, with strength and softness woven together. Let your legacy be made not from secrets revealed in a rush of emotion, but from the quiet wisdom of a life well lived. And if any of this resonated with you, if it made you pause, nod, maybe even smile or tear up a little, I hope you know this. You are not alone. So many people in your stage of life feel these same things, wonder these same things, carry the same silent truths. Feel free to share your thoughts or your own wisdom in the comments. Sometimes, hearing from someone who's been there is the greatest gift another person can receive. And if you found this video meaningful, I'd love it if you gave it a like. Maybe even subscribe for more conversations like this, the kind that matter, the kind that remind you that aging doesn't mean fading, it means deepening. Here's to living your best life at any age, to saying what matters and letting go of what doesn't, and to finding peace in the space between what you hold and what you share. You've earned that peace. Now live in it.